The breaking point. The galactic Senate chamber stretched impossibly wide, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation podium, her weathered hands steady despite the weight of what was coming. Around her, representatives from 47 species watched with expressions ranging from contempt to barely concealed fear. The Zephyrian Empire's Supreme Chancellor, a towering creature of scales and razor-sharp intelligence named Vexthor, rose from his ornate throne. The verdict had been delivered moments ago. Humanity would surrender half their colonies, dismantle 90% of their fleet, and submit to permanent monitoring by Zephyrian peacekeepers. The crime, according to the Senate, was existing too successfully. In just 80 years since first contact, humans had spread to 30 systems, their population exploding across the stars with a vitality that terrified the established powers. They called humans Deathworlders, survivors of a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. Chen's voice carried across the chamber with the weight of mountains. The human race came to the stars seeking friendship, seeking to share in the wonders of galactic civilization. We followed your laws, respected your borders, and contributed our technology freely. Our only crime was thriving. The medical advances alone that humanity had shared had saved billions of lives across dozens of species. Human engineers had revolutionized faster-than-light communication. Human farmers had turned barren worlds into gardens, yet here they stood being told to kneel or face extinction. Vexthor's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. His species had ruled this section of the galaxy for 3 millennia, and he saw humans as nothing more than clever animals that had learned to use tools. You mistake our patience for weakness, Deathworlder. You breed like insects, consume resources like a plague, and dare to call it success. The containment doctrine is mercy. Accept it or we will enforce it with fire. The transmission that changed everything arrived 17 hours later. Chen was aboard her flagship, the Resilience, when the emergency beacon from Harmony Station lit up every human receiver in known space. The colony had been home to 40,000 souls, mostly families of miners and scientists working to terraform a marginal world. The video feed showed Zephyrian warships in orbit, their plasma cannons turning the settlement into glass. Children's playgrounds melted into radioactive slag, hospitals full of patients vaporized in seconds. The Zephyrians hadn't even demanded surrender. They had simply decided to make an example. Chen watched the footage 3 times, memorizing every frame, every scream cut short, every life snuffed out for the crime of being human. Her crew stood silent on the bridge, their faces masks of controlled fury. These weren't warriors who had died, but families who had believed in the promise of peaceful coexistence. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her tactical officer, finally broke the silence. They recorded it. They wanted us to see this. They're proud of what they did. The response from Earth came within the hour. President Maria Santos appeared on every human channel, her face carved from stone. For 80 years, we tried to be what they wanted. We diminished ourselves, apologized for our nature, and accepted their restrictions. Today, they murdered 40,000 innocent people to teach us our place. The lesson has been received. As of this moment, all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Senate are severed. All human ambassadors are recalled. All treaties are void. What the galaxy didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 60 years. Every insult, every restriction, every humiliation had been met with secret preparation. Hidden in asteroid fields and dark corners of human space, the real fleet waited. Not the token defense forces the Senate knew about, but 2,000 warships built with one purpose: to fight a war against a technologically superior enemy and win. The ships were ugly by galactic standards, all function and no form. Where Zephyrian vessels were works of art with sweeping curves and elegant lines, human ships looked like flying bricks bristling with weapons. They used primitive fusion torches instead of exotic matter drives, but those torches could push them to accelerations that would turn most species into paste. Their weapons were kinetic and nuclear, crude but impossible to stop with standard shields designed for energy weapons. Admiral James Harrison commanded this ghost fleet from his dreadnought Vengeance. He had been preparing for this day since he was a cadet, studying every military disaster and triumph in human history. The galaxy thought humans were dangerous because they came from a death world. They had no idea that the real danger was that humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war against each other. and they had learned every dirty trick, every brutal tactic, every way to turn weakness into strength. The void gates were the key to galactic travel, massive structures that allowed instant transportation between star systems. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 7 of them, using them to project power across their territory. The closest one to human space was in the Kepler system, defended by a fleet of 100 warships under the command of Admiral Krexval, Vexthor's own brother. It was considered impregnable, a fortress in space that had never fallen in 1,000 years of warfare. Harrison's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at maximum velocity, already firing. 50,000 missiles launched in the first second, primitive chemical rockets that the Zephyrian sensors barely registered as threats. Their point defense systems activated, destroying thousands of missiles, but it was like trying to stop rain with a tennis racket. The missiles that got through didn't need to be sophisticated. They just needed to hit hard enough. Nuclear fireballs bloomed across the Zephyrian formation. Ships that had stood for centuries vanished in microseconds. Admiral Krexval screamed orders trying to rally his forces, but human ships were already among them, firing railguns at point-blank range. Tungsten rods accelerated to 10% of light speed, punched through shields and armor like they weren't there. The battle lasted 43 minutes. When it ended, the Void Gate belonged to humanity, and Admiral Krexval's fleet was an expanding cloud of debris. The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Deathworlders had not just refused to submit. They had destroyed a Zephyrian fleet without losing a single ship. On a dozen worlds, species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule for generations watched the footage and began to hope. The humans sent a message with the victory, broadcasting it on every frequency and every language. This is Fleet Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Forces. The Zephyrian Empire murdered 40,000 human civilians. We are here to collect payment. Any species that stands with them will share their fate. Any species that stands aside will be left in peace. Choose wisely. Chen received her orders while still in orbit around Earth. She would lead the Second Fleet to strike the Zephyrian supply bases in the Outer Rim. The war had begun, but it would be unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Humans didn't fight for conquest or glory. They fought for survival, and a species fighting for survival didn't follow rules. As her fleet prepared to jump, Chen looked at the picture on her desk. A young girl from Harmony Station who had sent her a drawing of Earth just days before the massacre. Her name had been Emma, and she had wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up. The human fleets moved like wolf packs through space, striking without warning, destroying infrastructure, and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. They didn't occupy territory or demand surrender. They simply erased every military asset the Zephyrians possessed, methodically and efficiently. The galaxy watched in horrified fascination as the Deathworlders showed what happened when patience ran out. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. They wouldn't survive 3 months. The Reckoning. The Void Gates changed hands in a matter of weeks. What had taken the Zephyrian Empire millennia to build, humanity systematically dismantled with brutal efficiency. Admiral Harrison stood on the Bridge of Vengeance, studying the tactical displays that showed human fleets spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Each fleet operated independently, but they moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. It was the result of centuries studying pack hunters on Earth, from wolves to killer whales, learning how to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. The Zephyrian response was predictable. They gathered their remaining fleets at their homeworld, Zephyria Prime, creating a defensive sphere of 2,000 warships. Emperor Vexthor himself took command, confident that no force in the galaxy could breach their defenses. He broadcast a message to all species, declaring humans to be a plague that must be exterminated for the good of galactic civilization. What he didn't expect was the response. The Corvani, a species of engineers who had been forced to build Zephyrian warships for 5 centuries, were the first to rebel. They shut down production facilities, sabotaged supply lines, and transmitted detailed technical specifications of Zephyrian ships to human forces. The Melody, whose peaceful culture had been nearly destroyed by Zephyrian occupation, rose up on 17 worlds simultaneously. The Terex, warriors who had been forced to serve as cannon fodder in Zephyrian wars, turned their weapons on their masters. Commander Chen met with representatives from these species on the liberated world of Haven. The gathering was unlike any diplomatic meeting in galactic history. There were no elaborate ceremonies, no complex protocols, just beings who had suffered under tyranny planning its downfall. The Corvani engineer, a spider-like being named Vexus, presented holographic blueprints of Zephyria Prime's defenses. They think their shields are impenetrable, but there's a resonance frequency that causes them to fluctuate. A window of 0.03 seconds every cycle. Marcus Webb, now promoted to captain, studied the data with interest. His team had been developing a new weapon, something the galaxy had never seen before. Relativistic kill vehicles, unmanned projectiles accelerated to 99% of light speed. At that velocity, a single kilogram of mass carried the energy of a nuclear weapon. The Zephyrians' shields were designed to stop energy weapons and conventional projectiles, not something moving at the edge of physics itself. The Alliance fleet that assembled was unlike anything in galactic history. Human warships flew alongside Corvani engineering vessels, Melody hospital ships, and Terek warrior craft. Each species brought their strengths united by a common purpose. The fleet numbered 3,000 ships, but more importantly, it carried the hopes of a dozen enslaved species. As they prepared to jump to Zephyria Prime, Chen addressed the combined fleet. Today we end 3,000 years of tyranny. Not for conquest, not for revenge, but for the simple right to exist free. They thought we were weak because we showed mercy. They mistook our restraint for inability. Today they learn the cost of that mistake. The battle for Zephyria Prime began with deception. Human stealth ships painted with radiation-absorbing materials and running on minimal power had been positioning themselves for weeks. They carried a special payload, the entire archived history of human warfare. Every battle, every strategy, every lesson learned in blood. The data was broadcast directly into the Zephyrian defense networks, overwhelming their tactical computers with millions of scenarios they had never imagined. While their systems tried to process wars fought with sticks and stones alongside space battles, the real attack began. The relativistic kill vehicles arrived first, 17 projectiles moving so fast they were invisible until impact. Each one struck with the force of a stellar core collapse, punching through shields and armor as if they didn't exist. 17. Zephyrian dreadnoughts, ships that had dominated space for centuries, simply ceased to exist. The psychological impact was even greater than the physical damage. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that could delete their strongest assets with invisible weapons. Emperor Vexthor watched his empire's death in real time. Human ships executed maneuvers that should have been impossible, accelerating and decelerating at rates that would liquefy most species. But humans had evolved on a world with variable gravity, crushing atmospheric pressure at ocean depths, and temperature ranges that would kill most galactic species. They had built their ships to accommodate what they could survive, and they could survive far more than anyone had imagined. The Corvani's frequency exploitation worked perfectly. Zephyrian shields flickered, and in those millisecond gaps human weapons found their marks. Railgun slugs, nuclear missiles, and directed energy weapons that humans had claimed not to possess all found their targets. The defensive sphere began to collapse, ships fleeing in every direction only to be run down by faster human vessels. The Terek warriors boarded crippled Zephyrian ships, their natural aggression finally unleashed after generations of forced servitude. The siege lasted 18 hours. When Vexthor finally surrendered, his empire was gone. His fleets were destroyed, his subject species liberated, his throne world under occupation. Chen accepted his surrender in the same Senate chamber where humanity had been condemned just months before. The recording was broadcast across the galaxy, showing the supreme leader of the Zephyrian Empire kneeling before a human commander. But humanity's true nature showed in what came next. There was no genocide, no mass executions, no rape and pillage that had characterized Zephyrian conquests. Human medical teams treated wounded enemies alongside allies. Human engineers began rebuilding destroyed infrastructure. Human teachers established schools to educate species that had been deliberately kept ignorant. The galaxy had expected vengeance. Instead, they got justice. The new galactic order that emerged was radically different. The Senate was dissolved, replaced by a council where every species had equal representation. The Void Gates were declared neutral territory, administered jointly by all species. Military forces were limited by treaty, with humanity maintaining the largest fleet not for conquest but as guardians of the peace. The containment doctrine was reversed, with species encouraged to expand and grow according to their nature. Chen retired after the war, returning to Earth to teach at the military academy. Her final lecture to the graduating class became required viewing for all human diplomatic and military personnel. We didn't win because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. We won because we remembered something the galaxy had forgotten. That mercy is not weakness, but the greatest strength. That restraint is not inability, but choice. We showed them what Deathworlders could do when pushed too far, and then we showed them what humans do when we win. We build, we heal. We forgive, but we never forget. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had tried peace and been given war. They had excelled at both, but they preferred peace. The difference now was that everyone knew what would happen if humans were forced to choose war again. The Deathworlders had finally snapped, turned the galaxy into a battlefield, and then turned it into something better. They had proven that sometimes the most dangerous species is the one that chooses not to be dangerous until it has no other choice. Years later, a monument was erected on Harmony Station. Rebuilt from the ashes of its destruction, it bore the names of the 40,000 who had died, but also a simple message in every known language. They died believing in peace. We fought to honor that belief. We won to ensure no one else would have to. It stood as a reminder that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to wage war, but their ability to choose when not to. The galaxy had pushed the Deathworlders too far, and in their response humanity had shown both the depths of their fury and the heights of their mercy. They had turned the galaxy into war, and then they had turned it into hope.